It's Wednesday, it's 12:30. You know what that means. It is the Wednesday Axon Bulletin. I'm delighted to be here in a State of Mind studios for a change. Good to be here, and I'm delighted to be joined by two of the best contributors out there. I'm going to put that out there and put the challenge for the rest of the podcast. We've got Amy Canavan and Natasha Meikle. How are you both doing, girls?
Well, you didn't say that when it's just me, so it's obviously Natasha. So
it's because I'm a guest on this Wednesday show, and he's been polite to his new guest on a Wednesday. That must be
usually that polite.
Are we going to fall out again this week, Amy? It's been a couple of weeks since we had a fallout.
I'll referee.
I think it has. Oh, there we go.
I mean, you're used to doing that on a Tuesday show, Natasha, to be fair. So, but we'll see how it goes. And the question is, how are you doing? Because how is the big talking point that's came out over the last few hours or so. Newspaper reports from Stephen McGowan in the Daily Mail today suggesting that the deal for Eddie Howe is getting very close to getting over the line. It's been 9 weeks now since Neil Lennon's departure. Amy, we spoke about this last week, but maybe there is finally light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, there could be. You know, you can't really... How many times have we heard this season though, you know, that we're that close, we're this close, it's going to be this week, it's going to be that week. So, you know, I think you've got to take a little bit with a pinch of salt. Again, obviously McGowan's a decent source, he certainly is, but there's been a few supposed decent sources this season, and, you know, we are 9 weeks on now, and like I say, how many times have we heard that, how will be in this week, this weekend, it's Monday, it's happening Thursday, you know, it's getting a little bit tiresome now. So of course, yep, it's exciting, but, you know, there's a big fixture at the weekend as well. There's no surprise that these are trying to hit the headlines. You've just got to, I think you've definitely got to take everything with a pinch of salt.
A pinch of salt, as Amy says, Natasha, but Celtic fans are starting to get impatient, and when you see a story like that breaking overnight, it's natural to get more excited, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, the fans are going to jump on every sort of snippet that we're getting now. There's really not much else to talk about. The cup competitions are all over, the league's all over. There is very little else for the fans to focus on other than the non-ending question of who is the next manager going to be. So when we do get sources like McGowan come out and say things like that, people are going to jump on it. It's going to get talked about more. The hype's going to build. And it's just one of these sort of never-ending cycles that someone says something, it gets built up and built up by the fans, nothing happens, and it comes crashing back down until the next time someone tells us it's really close. But in saying that, this time, I said this last time, this time I believe that we are actually almost there. You know, we know that these negotiations take time. Mm-hmm. We know that, like, there's a lot of pieces of a jigsaw to put into place when we're trying to bring in a new manager, and not only a new manager, but likely, you know, perhaps a new management team to go with him, a new director of football, or whatever we're going to call that role. So there's a lot of pieces to try and fit, and these last sort of negotiations, these final things to do, take time. We know they do, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating. You know, we've also got to consider Howe's opinion. You know, he's going to have a lot of dilemmas in his own head, and it would be reasonable for us to think, is he sitting considering, you know, what will happen with some jobs in England? Is he holding off for that? Obviously, the last thing we want is to get to the end of the season and him to have stalled so much he then turns elsewhere. You know, look at the backroom team who might be coming from Bournemouth. Apparently, we're hearing the rumours are that he wants to bring his Bournemouth team with him. Mm-hmm. You know, Bournemouth are sitting in a position where they're going to get themselves into the playoffs and have a chance, you know, at promotion. If you were a coach at Bournemouth right now and Eddie was asking you to come up to Glasgow with him, but you know if you're getting that promotion, there's going to be a clause in their contracts that legislate for a massive pay increase if they do get that promotion. So maybe they're, you know, sitting and holding off as well. So a lot of pieces to fall into place, and crossing my fingers, but I think this is the time that the pieces are going to come together and we might have an announcement within the week.
Now, that's a massive kind of statement to put out there, an announcement within the week, but I mean, it would sort of bring the morale back up amongst the fans. Now, there's two sides of this. There is fans that will get really excited at this news, and there's fans that are kind of at the stage now where it's like, it's another story, it's another one. Just like as you were saying, Amy, you've got to kind of take it with a pinch of salt. I'm just going to bring up one of the comments here from Facebook user. It just says, I do not believe a single word of how to Celtic. And then you've got fans on the other side like Zinkovic 8754. What an amazing appointment and message it would be if Howe decides to go for Celtic. Now, one of the big things that has kind of troubled the Celtic fan base this season is the disconnect between the club and the support. When you look at it, I think if you bring in this appointment, he's not going to be everyone's favourite, but it will start that process of getting the fans back on side. You've got someone that you can trust for the future going forward. Natasha, as you were just saying there, looking at bringing his own boardroom, not his own boardroom, sorry, that would be completely different, his own backroom team to it. Amy, how important will that be that he has his own team going forward? It was one of the big criticisms that was discussed about Neil Lennon's time, was that he was kind of forced upon to take John Kennedy and to take Gavin Strachan and to take the iPad and the laptop and everything else that came along with that deal. But yeah, having your own team, that is very important, and it could be the idea that this is what's holding up this deal.
Absolutely. We've said it for pretty much the whole of Lennon's tenure, that it wasn't his own team, and you talk about the laptop and all of that, and it was so obvious that Strachan certainly wasn't in his plans. Kennedy, it was trying to, you can even view that as trying to be a continuation from Rodgers. Obviously, I think Kennedy was almost like assistant manager before I think Lennon even officially got that managerial role. So there's all of that sort of you can maybe see the Kennedy piece you saw in Lennon, and obviously there's a bit of a history there as well. Kennedy's been at the club a very long time, and is a real figurehead. But you look at Strachan, it just there was never really that connection. And then we joke about it, there was more of that connection with the laptop or the iPad. So it is important that Howe gets the team that he wants. Of course, I think, there's going to be a certain select of fans, and we've touched on it before, and I know Natasha has as well on a Tuesday, that you don't want to give the head coach or the manager, whatever role it may be, too much power, because they're not going to be here for 10 years or a Fergie 25 years. Those days in football are long gone. So it is a short stint, maybe 2-3 years. If we're lucky, that's what we'll get out of them. But we have to make this, we have to think about ourselves. Obviously, you're picturing how, yes, may only be 2-3 years, but you've got to think of us now. We are going into a rebuild right now. And if he's going to be at the forefront of that, you need him to go in wholeheartedly as well. And if he was only comfortable doing that with his backroom staff, then I think you've got to grant him his wishes. This isn't just like a Kevin Graham, Jack Ross sort of scenario. This is a big name, and he's asking for he's wanting a big team for a reason, because he is a big name, and he knows himself that Celtic are doing well if they land him. Natasha's touched on it. If you look at maybe Newcastle and Crystal Palace, these sort of roles may appear. You look at Sheffield United. Sheffield United is one of a more lucrative club in the sense that what Howe likes to do, get that club back up to the Premier League. He knows that's what he's good at. He knows he can do that. And if he has a budget, what he had at Sheffield United would be similar to what he had at Bournemouth. Maybe that's what he envisages. So if he is wanting to come to Celtic, you've got to grant him his wishes. And I just feel if the backroom staff, obviously, I think maybe 17-18 is a little bit excessive, but you've got to give him his dues. And if it be, obviously the talks of Bournemouth, that is complicated, and these guys are all still in employment as well, and as Natasha's totally said, if they're going for promotion and playoffs are beckoning, then that's going to be tough to steer them away. Then it's going down to relationships between Howe and his team, and you don't want to come too fiddled in with that. But yeah, I think fundamentally you've got to give him a chance, and you've got to give him his team, which he would feel comfortable that rebuild can be the most successful.
Yeah, Natasha, Amy's touched on that there about the size of the backroom team. Now, when you look at it, when you think of Celtic's backroom team, the first people that come to mind is John Kennedy, Gavin Strachan, but then you go deeper beyond that again, and there's a lot of people which a lot of Celtic fans won't know who they are, but they play pivotal roles. You see them on the pitch at Lennoxtown, you see them before the games carrying out the training sessions, and when you look at it, as Amy says, Howe has had teams of 13, 14, 15 before, but it is giving the man the complete freedom to implement his own style. And as Amy also said, some of them may also be at Bournemouth. Now, Bournemouth are in the position at the minute where they're challenging to get back in to the Premier League. With that could maybe come a bonus, an increase in wage. So it is important for Celtic to kind of see it out. And will it be that if they announce Howe this week, which would be fantastic ahead of the game at the weekend, it may just be that it's Howe plus 3, 4, 5 at the minute, with more to come, very similar to the way that Stephen Glass was announced at Aberdeen, with the knowledge that Scott Brown would be joining him in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right about them timing the announcement properly. There are only 3 games left of this season. The season ticket renewal forms are going to be out very soon, and it's going to be very difficult for the club to ask fans to put their hand in their pocket again for another season ticket without any management team in place and without any communication, without any indication of the direction the club are going in the future. They simply can't send those forms out with none of those things in place, which leads me to think that this announcement is coming sooner rather than later. You've touched on it, we've all touched on it. There are going to be wider negotiations. If that Bournemouth backroom team, or at least some of them, are coming in, then the budget that Celtic are allocating to the backroom team is going to need to increase. Like you've touched on, we've already got our own backroom team. So are we going to take Bournemouth's as well? Are we going to take some of them? Are we going to lose some of ours? A lot of moving pieces in this, and a lot of things that we're going to need to get in place. Like we've rightly said, those Bournemouth guys are going to get a massive pay increase if they get up to the Premier League. That's going to make negotiations with them even more difficult. It gives them another couple of cards in their hand to use for their side of the negotiations. And it just depends if Dermot's going to put his hand in his pocket and look to try and match that, or at least get somewhere close to the potential wages they could be on if they're to go to the Premier League. Everything's doable in a negotiation. No matter who you're negotiating with, everything is doable, provided you have the money to back it up. So if Celtic really, really want Eddie Howe, and Eddie Howe really, really wants these 2 or 3 people from Bournemouth, Dermot can make it happen if he puts his hand in his pocket. So it depends how much he wants Eddie Howe. And I think he'll see the feeling amongst the support. He'll see the negativity. He'll see the disengagement with the fans, and know that is going to hit hard in the season ticket sales unless they do something. And the do something that he needs to do is get this manager appointed. And being Eddie Howe would be the one, I think, that will unite the fans out the most out of the candidates that are being talked about. I think he's the one that's universally, or at least largely, had he's the one that we want from the fans. Everyone else, there have been some other good suggestions who could come in and do a job, but there's such a split amongst the fans. I think that what the club really need to do at the moment is make an appointment that gets the vast majority of fans on side. And Eddie Howe is that guy. So not only does he unite the fans, not only is he going to, please the fans at the time of the season ticket renewals, but he's also actually, that all to one side, he's got that attributes that we're looking for in our next manager. So he ticks all the boxes. So we now just need to make it happen and get that appointment announced as soon as possible.
I mean, the one person I'll be absolutely delighted for is Russell Boyce, because he's driving that many buses and the price of diesel keeps going up day after day. I see it all the time. It can't be cheap to run all these buses that he's driving. So if we eventually get Howe over the line, then I'm sure they can park the rest of them up for another time.
I think he'll be quite sad about that, actually. I think he'll feel sad to have to let some of these buses go. His Mourinho mega bus, his Keane bus, all parked for another few years.
Oh, you know what will happen? They'll come back out of retirement the next time around. It's always the same.
He'll keep the keys.
Yeah, he'll keep them ticking over. But Amy, there was a point Natasha made there about Dermot Desmond putting his hand in his pocket, and we just mentioned about the season ticket renewals. Well, fans will be asked to put their hand in their pocket. Now, I was listening to Clyde Super Scoreboard on Saturday, and it was quite openly discussed that the season tickets would go on sale as of May 1st. Now, that is Saturday. Now, it's not been confirmed by the club. We've not heard this, but this was openly discussed. So, going on the idea that you need a manager to sign off the new renewal form, should it give you hope seeing this news today that maybe it's this week and 63 days on now, a couple of days in for Dominic Mackay to kind of work out where the coffee room and the biscuits are and get on the phone? we're maybe starting to see a bit of encouraging news.
Yeah, absolutely. As we've said, we've said all along, really, that you think that the manager obviously would be in place, or head coach, whatever it may be, would be in place by the time season tickets come around. As you've said, nobody's really said from the club wise if this is happening on Saturday or not. But there's been so many occasions that we've said, then the double's ended, so Monday was the perfect occasion. You could say that after Sunday, that then next Monday is the perfect occasion. There's all these things that there's been moments, that this is the day. Let's carry the momentum and let's announce that manager, let's announce that head coach, let's get that engagement and let's get the fans back on side. Are you just going to do it on a random Thursday, that because then it just looks so obvious that it's because the season tickets are coming out on Saturday? There's PR guys and girls in place for a reason, because these things are meant to be well thought out, and I appreciate then if Howe's making it a little bit complicated, then you can't just announce it if the man himself isn't ready. But you'd like to think that there's a little bit more planning into it than just, like you say, season tickets coming out. I know that sounds a little bit contradictory, but then again, like I say, a random Thursday, fans can see right through that. If it's the process of carrying momentum, that's what we want. And who's to say that there's going to be many more wins this season, if any, and you never know. So is that momentum really then lost? And that's sad that, like, I'm joking, but I'm not. And that's the case. There's been those moments, and like I say, I think Monday would have been one of the perfect occasions as well, just to carry that little bit of momentum, and that's all we talk about. It's reading the room, which the club have failed to do all season. Mm-hmm. There's no sort of engagement, so the communication's not been there. Maybe last week with Mackay was the perfect time, even if not the perfect time to announce how. Last week with Mackay was certainly the perfect time to put out a little statement and just say, it's a holding statement, a manager, we are looking for one. Where the hunt is on, the process is underway, because there's really still not been any recognition of that. Obviously, the fact that we're having to talk amongst ourselves and saying, we're hoping there's work going on behind the scenes, we should be in the knowledge that there's something going on behind the scenes, and that Dermot Desmond's working tirelessly, and X, Y and Z, they are working tirelessly. We are just hoping. And really, is there really much vouching that we should have the hope in the club this season? I don't really think so. So, it's maybe a little bit of blind loyalty, but like I say, if it's on a random Thursday, then so be it.
I think that the quote goes, it's the hope that kills you, and that's kind of the way it's been for Celtic this season. Just want to bring this point up from Declan McConville, who's on the Thursday Club, and I'll make sure to carry on this tradition, Amy, of getting the names right at the end of the show.
Good man.
That's been a couple of weeks in a row now. If you remember 5 years ago, Davies and Driscoll took a week after the Rodgers announcement, so that's what we were saying earlier. If it's a case of having to wait on Howe's backroom team, just get them in and then we can go through that afterwards. Now, we spoke about there sort of the PR from Celtic this season, and we're going to talk about something that was actually came out in December but has now recently come back to light because of I think someone picked it up on Twitter and they kind of ran with it, and it's about Celtic and their PR this season and the relationships with the fans and kind of moving away from what was the core values of the club. And it's to do with the partnership that Celtic have announced this season with a company called Dahu International. Natasha, you know a bit more about that. Is that correct? Dahu International, is that the name of them?
That's right, yeah. It's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? And like you say, it did fly under the radar. And this article about it was posted in December, Celtic's partnership with this Chinese company. And like I mentioned before, if something flies under the radar, it's because it's supposed to be under the radar. Mm-hmm. If Celtic had wanted us to know about this and thought that this was this great partnership that they wanted publicised, you know what they're like. They would have absolutely milked it and we would have known all about it. This has flown under the radar because they want it to have flown under the radar. And that's because of the company in itself. I've got concerns on, a couple of levels about this. On one hand, the company specialise in video technology and also on surveillance. So why have we engaged them? Is it for these apparent video walls we're going to put up in the Celtic Superstore? Is it for the drones that are apparently going to film training at Lennoxtown and give us a whole new analysis angle? Is it that, or are they, engaging them for any surveillance reasons? I know other clubs in the Premier League have recently invested in their surveillance so that they do have eyes on the fans at all times. Is that something that Celtic are doing? Because I think the fans would firstly like to know about it, and secondly be a bit concerned about that. So regardless of what the company do, my main concern with our partnership with this company is some of the things you read about them. For example, the US Department of Commerce have actually banned them from being engaged in America or having business over there because there are concerns about their human rights violations. We're talking migrant worker camps, exploitation, real human rights breaches. I don't want my club to be anywhere near a company that has this sort of reputation. I fully appreciate that, some people might come back and say that that's unfounded. We don't know that. If the US Department of Commerce are taking that approach, there's no smoke without fire, is there? This is not a company that I want the club to be involved in. And if they are, it's just another example of them being so detached from the values that they were set up to promote, the values that they do promote and the values that the fans hold. So I would like a bit more explanation about our partnership with them. You can look back to a couple of weeks ago when Celtic put out a post on Twitter that was promoted by debt recovery
agency.
And the backlash was massive. The fans quite rightly said that they don't want the club associated with that. And again, it's detached from the morals and the values and why the club was set up. And we actually got a response back from that. The response was that it was a mistake and that Celtic have what they called a blacklist of companies that they don't use. Which is fair enough. I'm absolutely happy with that. Let's stick to companies that support who we are as a club. So if we do have that blacklist, what's the criteria? Is a company who breaches human rights law not on the blacklist? If not, why not? But I think Celtic need or could have or should have come out with some explanation about the partnership, why it's been formed and why we're quite happy to work with this company. So I certainly do see the concerns that a lot of people have with this one.
Yeah, and for anyone that isn't aware of the situation, the company were set up, as Natasha was saying, to introduce video walls so that you could review performances at Lennoxtown. It was also set up to put video walls within the Superstore at Celtic Park, and there was also a kind of further bit where drones would be able to be used to fly over to watch player movement. Clearly we haven't really made the full advantage of that this season, because I posted a video on Twitter the other day that was sharing from another account that basically showed Celtic conceding 7 of the same goals from a corner this season. So if they maybe had the drone footage for that, they'd be able to mark up properly. But Amy, you look at it, as Natasha said, there's a sort of PR disaster coming out of the club with this, and it's only just resurfaced from December. We spoke about the debt recovery agency and it taken away from the fact that Celtic were founded as a club to feed the poor in the East End and the immigrants. My main concern with this wasn't the fact it was a Chinese company and the connections with the US, because you see it now. How many people have a Huawei phone? How many people have a Chinese phone that is now banned from going into the US? But when you look at it, the human rights concerns, the idea that they're actually kind of monitoring people 24/7, the sort of big brother attitude to it, it's something Celtic should really distance themselves from, isn't it?
Yeah, I just have to completely and utterly agree with Natasha there. You just need to reiterate really that I don't want my club associated with anything like this. And as Natasha said, nobody will. You're looking back on our values, our morals, what we were founded upon, and this is not what we stand for. So again, as Natasha rightly said, there's a reason that this has went under the radar, because the club want it to be. So there needs to be a little bit of knowledge on it, and I'm totally behind anyone who can bring any sort of light to it, because as we've said, it's just all the connotations that are being brought with this are things that I certainly do not want the club to be associated with.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what the response is. Natasha, as you said, the reaction that the debt recovery agency got, I mean, that got a statement within 3-4 hours from the club as soon as they'd put that out. Now, this has been hanging around since December. They advertise, you've seen the pictures of the games where the advertising board's going around with them being advertised at the games. So as you said, this has went under the radar, but now it's been brought to the club's attention with the new incoming CEO, with the new kind of shuffle. You'd like to think that it's one that they review and they say, I'm sorry, we're going to break up this partnership, we'll move on, and just kind of leave it at that. Apologise for being involved in a relationship like this, being involved in what you would potentially say is a blacklisted partner, and then just kind of move on.
Yeah, Absolutely. And, I think if they were to do that, the fans would be frustrated. There'd be a few idols, you got it wrong again, another PR disaster. But thank you for acknowledging what we have said and taking, the values and views of the fans on board and doing something about it. And saying that, I think there's no chance. I know that they did back then from the debt collection one, but we're talking about a sponsored tweet there. That's probably of limited value. A big partnership with a large Chinese technology company, that's likely to involve some sort of, lucrative deal. The board aren't going to back out of this one, I don't think. I think they might ignore it. We shall see. But going by the recent engagement from the club, my hopes are not high on a response on this.
Just bringing up this point from Kieran 1888, only went under the radar because the drones are blocking the signal. Tinfoil hats on, boys. Yeah, that's a good one. I've got to give him that one. But yeah, I said PR nightmare. It's something that you want the club to take first hand, deal with it. Look, there's been plenty of PR disasters in football this season. We've seen what happened with the European Super League down south. As you mentioned, this debt recovery agency, there's lots of issues to go on with, but you just like to think that the club can acknowledge it, make the apology and move on, and we'll see what happens there. Speaking about, though, PR and discussions, there is a big event taking place on a Celtic State of Mind tonight at 7pm, and Natasha, you're heavily involved in this as well, so we'll get your points in a second. But just to advertise it slightly, Celtic Shared and Celtic Trust are coming together to take part on a Celtic State of Mind tonight, and we'll be debating the Celtic Trust share proposal. Now, there will be involvement from 20-minute Tims, 4 Tims in a podcast, the North Curve Celtic, 67 Hail Hail, More Than 90 Minutes podcast, and also the Homeboys. Natasha, you're also involved in this tonight, so tell us a bit more about what we should be expecting.
Yes, we had the Celtic Share guys on the show before, and they told us a bit about their proposals, which is a show that went down really well. The guys are great and their proposals are really interesting. For all those who follow Celtic Share and Celtic Trust on Twitter or any social media platform, you'll see their proposal about refunds to the fans who have purchased season tickets by way of a share issue. I think we can all agree that we've all paid 500, 600, 700, whatever was paid for their season tickets this year, and had very little value back for that. Really, the equivalent of a Celtic TV pass. What's that, about £90 worth? That's what we've had in return for that money we spent on our season ticket. I think we all agree that we feel a bit shortchanged by that, and the club need to do something to compensate that, and to mark the loyalty of the fans and continuing to give them the money, especially in a time like this. The club don't know the fans' financial positions, especially during this period of lockdown, furlough. It's a difficult time for a lot of people, and £500, £600 is not an insignificant amount of money to give for absolutely nothing in return. So what Celtic Shared and Celtic Trust are proposing is that the club refund the fans for their season tickets, not in cash, but in shares, so the money stays within the club. Now, they've been detailing this proposal in a lot more detail than I've given here on their Instagram and Twitter pages. But there is a lot of debate, there's a lot of discussion, and people have a lot of questions, which is only natural with a proposal like this. So tonight's event, it looks great. We've got a panel lined up with representatives from both Celtic Trust and Celtic Shared, hosted by us on Axon. And we have representatives from all the podcasts that you just mentioned who are going to come on and ask these guys questions. There's only so much detail and so much debate you can have on Twitter with a character limit. You can't answer these questions in full detail. You can't give the sort of explanations that you want to. So what we're creating here is almost like a town hall event where we've got a panel, we've got our virtual audience from the podcasts who can come on and ask these guys anything. It's no holds barred. If people are critical of the proposal, that's absolutely fine. Come along, make your point, listen to what the guys have to say in response. But yeah, so no questions off limits. The guys are going to be there to answer them. We're going to get a lot more detail about the proposal and why they think it's a good idea and why this is the best way forward for the fans and for the club, while still giving some sort of added value. If anyone's got any questions that they'd like to be put to the panel, then feel free to send us them over on social media, on Twitter. Send them to me, send them to Axon, Celtic Shared, Celtic Trust. Send them in and we'll use them as part of the show. Otherwise, tune in at 7 o'clock and have a listen. Let us know what you think.
Now, Amy, there was the point we discussed a couple of weeks ago when the proposal first came out, and we got a bit of stick for what we said, saying that we didn't believe that it was the right thing for the club to do. We didn't think that it was something that would go ahead. But now you're getting to see more information coming out from Celtic Shared, Celtic Trust. It will potentially change a couple of people's ideas on the scenario. For me, I'm not completely sold on it. I will listen tonight to see if it changes my mind any. But taking a look at it, do you think this is a good proposal that's been put forward by the Trust and by Celtic Shared to compensate fans for this additional value? Natasha, you mentioned refunds, but we know it's not really a refund. Celtic have said there is no refunds this season, but fans have always been asking for this additional value. You get a virtual match programme, which I don't think 95% of fans have even noticed coming into their inbox. We've had the odd game here and there, but as Natasha says, Amy, it's sort of getting a video package this year. It's probably to the value of about £100 to make up the rest of the shortfall. They're suggesting the shares. Is it the right way to go?
Well, as Natasha's rightly said, tonight is all about then you're gaining the information about this proposal. If there was stick a few weeks ago from us, then it's probably because the issue or the proposal was a little bit thin. But tonight there's that platform there to gain everything. So to be honest, tomorrow's panel is probably the best people to ask, because you're gonna have all of that information behind you. But it's certainly there, and it's obviously got a little bit more beef now because there's going to be seven podcasts, including Axom, all there. So there's momentum, and that's all we've really spoke about. It's all about momentum, so it's going to be there tonight. Natasha's definitely sold it to me, so I'm certainly looking forward to it.
I'm just going to bring this point up because back to what we were just discussing a second ago, and it's from Paul McLean. It says, really, Nat, but betting firms are okay. But look, we're not saying betting firms are okay, but there's a lot of things that are wrong with the way that Celtic go about their business. The betting things is a real concern for me, and I'll give a shout out to a local person down my way, Gam Talk, who is a charity set up to help people that have had issues with their gambling addictions before. They're going round schools to teach kids on the issues that could potentially come up if they ever get into the habit, and to help people out. And they've got some fantastic sponsors with Lawrence Shankland of Dundee United who are helping them out as well. So look, gambling, that is something that I'd like to see us moving away from. You've saw over the last kind of few years, where I say few years, it's gone back a bit now, where there used to be the sort of cigarette companies sponsoring events, and that's moved on. I think it's a societal thing when it comes down to that, and eventually people will start to move away from the gambling thing. I think you already see it on some jerseys where it says gamble responsibly under the gambling sponsorship. That's probably the first step, but then it's going to take time. But things like this, things like the partnership that's set up with the Chinese company, that can be ended right away. It's not something that you have to weed out of the club. It's something you can do now, and it's not the only issue that's going on at the club.
Absolutely. And what else? They're not mutually exclusive either. You can call out one thing. You don't have to call out everything at the same time. There's a lot of things in football that I would change. There's a lot of partnerships I could criticise. There's a lot of companies you could criticise. But that, on one hand, does not prevent you from calling out another. This is something that's just come onto our radar recently, something that we've discussed amongst ourselves on Twitter, and now we've discussed on the show. If we want to get into the whole association with gambling, with football, with alcohol sponsors in football, that would take up hours. We could do our full other show on that. But us calling out, a Chinese company and calling out drinks and advertising and all the sorts of different betting and advertising, they're not mutually exclusive. We can do one without having to do the other, and I think we're all pretty much on the same page on that.
And as someone that likes to always put a wee comment in now and again, and I've had some good banter with him over the time, Monty, I can't bring up his point because I don't want to bring up some profanity, but it basically just says stop using Parks of Hamilton as well, and that's probably something else that Celtic could look to do next season, is to maybe change the bus company as well, try and move this sort of connection with the club across the city away from that. And it's something that we're going to talk about, is the game against them at the weekend. Not many people want to talk about it. We're getting to a stage now where 3 games left in a season is 3 games too many. You just want to look ahead, but we do have the game to talk about. But Natasha, just rounding up on the the event that's taking place tonight. Getting the questions in and stuff like that is also interactive tonight. People can leave comments and it might also get discussed.
You're right, just like you can leave comments on this show. The show will be broadcast live across our Twitter page, our Facebook page, the YouTube channel. So just like you comment on this show now, go ahead and comment your questions during the show and we can bring them up as well, so it can be fully interactive, and we look forward to everyone's questions coming in.
Yeah, definitely, and we're looking forward to seeing all the comments that's coming in so far on Facebook, on Twitter and on YouTube. We are sitting at 11.2k subscribers, so if you haven't already done so, 11.3 have just been corrected by producer Paul, so if you haven't already done so, hit the like, subscribe buttons. They do really help us to grow the channel, and make sure that you tune in tonight at 7 o'clock for the discussion with the Trust and with Celtic Shared. But the main talking point we have here is on the bottom of the screen, and it's some of the changes that have been suggested for the game at the weekend. Now, Amy, we discussed this last week. John Kennedy came out with his interview before the Aberdeen game, and he was quoted as saying that it was time to start making some changes to the side. The focus was always on picking up the points, but I mean, you look at that team that played against Aberdeen last Wednesday, the only change was almost enforced by bringing in Nir Bitton for Chris Ayer. Now, when are these changes going to be made? There's only 3 games to go. You've got the big game at the weekend. Do we expect to see some coming up, or is it just a case of another false promise?
I think it's a false promise. I think anybody now that, if it happens, then great, it's a bit of a surprise. But as you said last week, we were talking about all those changes. We spent almost the whole show talking about all these potential changes, and then, we looked like a right pair of tubes, didn't we?
Not for the first time. Not for the first time.
That lineup came out, and like you say, what was it? Beaton for Ayer, and you're shaking your head. So, it's, you look at those. Would I like Sorrow in for Brown? Yes. Would I like Rogic in for Christie? Yes. Would I like Griffin for Eddie? Yes. Is it going to happen? I don't think that all 3 are going to happen. There you go. You don't make fun of me again. It's a bit of a mess. It really is, and is it time for Kennedy to be bold? Well, it was probably bold about 6 weeks ago. It was time, about 6 weeks ago to be bold, and it's not happening. So do I see it happening this weekend, of all weekends? I don't, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and it's now the 3rd time that we've played them under Kennedy's management. Imagine saying that, Kennedy's management. I don't think he'll have a managerial job once he leaves Celtic, let's be honest. But surely, Natasha, you must have learned something from the previous 2 occasions against him to line up at the weekend, maybe with a couple of changes put in there, and actually maybe give it a go, because that's one of the things that we've been critical about, is that we've had these 2 games, there've been 2 free shots at them, and we've still struggled to lay a finger on them.
Yeah, do you know, I'm probably with Amy on this one. I think Kennedy's team selections over the last few weeks have shown us that he is not going to, rock the boat. He's going to keep it the same, very little changes, and I think he's just trying to keep us ticking over and avoid, anything disastrous until the end of the season. I get both points that I've been seeing, discussed when we're talking about this game. On one hand, it's important that we go and win it. Yes, it's a dead rubber. Yes, it doesn't matter in terms of the league position. But, it's still a Glasgow derby. It's always going to matter to the fans. And like I said yesterday, the players are playing for pride. The pride of the club, their professional pride. And this means something to the fans. This is the last chance for the players to avoid ending the season without having beaten Rangers. We need to give this absolutely everything, although to all intents and purposes it is a dead rubber. This is a game that is massively important for us to go out and win and stop their invincible league season. So with that in mind, you have one argument which says, okay, then let's put out our strongest team, let's put out our best team and go and really try and win this game. And the argument then is that our best team involves players like Edouard, it involves Christie, it involves, Ayer, like the team that we've seen over the last few weeks, the supposed starting 11 need to start to try and win this game. But my answer to that would be, is that our best team? Look how poorly they performed over the last couple of weeks. Edouard did almost nothing against Aberdeen. Literally almost nothing. Any one of us on this show today could almost have done what Edouard did that day. It's literally ineffective. I said after the Rangers game, the Rangers Cup game, that I would quite happily not see Edouard play for Celtic again. Only because he's not going to be here next season. And when he is here, he's so switched off. He is checked out. He is here and body, but not here in mind. His mind is on his next club. So why are we playing him? You know, the answer to that is because we need to win the game against Rangers, and he's our best striker. Is he? I've not seen that for the last few weeks. Try play Ajeti, try and play Griffiths. Are they going to do any worse than Edwards done on recent showings? I can't see it. But I think taking, the first angle, the angle of we need to go out with our strongest starting 11 and we need to win this game, I think what we'll see is Kennedy make very, very, very minimal changes. Unfortunately, because like Amy said, yeah, I play Sorrell, yes, I play Rogic, yes, I play Griffiths. Will Kennedy? No, I don't think so.
And Amy, when we were looking at the team last week, I mean, we put our lineups together, and someone that didn't actually come into the equation at all was Karamoko Dembele, and Paddy John Hughes brings up the point, unleash Karamoko on them. Now, when he came off the bench against Aberdeen the other day, I thought he was actually very impressive. He's someone that we also thought was going to be leaving the club this summer, but the talk is that Celtic have extended his contract by a further year. There was a year option on the deal. Now, he's 17 years old. I don't think it's someone that you'd want to throw into the hype of this game, but if there ever was one for him to be thrown into, it's a game like this where, again, it matters very little for both teams. When you look at the sort of way that the last one petered out in the league, it was almost like a pre-season friendly towards the end. So, I mean, why not give him the chance?
Yeah, exactly. That's your answer there. Why not? As we've touched upon, and Natasha's spot on, you say, right, well, Edouard's part of our best 11 and whatnot. Has Edouard been probably the best part of our best 11 this whole season? No, he's not been there. He's not turned up. You could probably say for the majority of the season, he's not interested. And the most frustrating thing is because you see him then go away with the France under-21s, if it be for the actual Euros or, when there was qualifiers or any sort of game for France, and he's playing to the abilities that we know, and that's the frustrating point. So you know that he's not just having an off year, because he's managing to do it when he's in France. So what's the difference? It's because he's not interested when he's here. So I will come to Dembele, but for Edouard, I would definitely start Griffiths. I think as well, well in Griffiths' camp, so far in deep now, he can't really get out. But there's that sort of talk over the last few days that there's the possibility that the Euro squads maybe enlarged to 26 men instead of 23. Now, if Griffiths isn't thinking that he could be one of those 3 extra men, then his attitude is completely and utterly all wrong. So he's got 3 games to pretty much make the biggest competition in his international career. This is history. This is the first tournament in my lifetime that Scotland have been to, and of course I want to see Griffiths there. It's massive. So there is an opportunity for him there, because you look at the strikers, and we've talked about it before. The strikers for Scotland are abysmal. Lyndon Dykes and Shea Adams, thank God for them, because other than that, it's the bare minimal. You're looking like Kevin Nisbet's even managed to. I'd take Nisbet as well, but that last final space could easily go to Griffiths. So there is an incentive there for Griffiths. For Edouard, there's clearly nothing, as Natasha says. He's just looking for the next club. He certainly is. But Griffiths, there is something there. And then, as you're saying, obviously with Dembele, I'd absolutely go for him. If he's got that extra year extension, then he's got a point to be proven as well. He's thinking, right, well then there's next year that he could be breaking into the squad and breaking into that first team. Again, this is the perfect opportunity. All we spoke about is that, these games, these dead rubbers, as you say, that's the issue, that we've not been injecting the youngsters, and we've not been giving the so-called fringe players the opportunity. So let's give them this opportunity. It's not that you're giving a guy who we don't even really know the name. This young guy was touted to be one of the most sought after and one to watch, and was given all these massive titles and all of that malarkey. So give him that stage, give him that platform, and any time he's had it, he's taken it with and grabbed it with both hands. So I think it's absolutely the right time to be doing it.
We're going to mention just in a second about the idea of whether that pressure has got to him this season, and that's why he hasn't been performing to the levels and he's not really been involved in the squad. But it is some breaking news I have to bring you here on A Celtic State of Mind. It's not the Eddie Howe news, unfortunately, but I'll just bring this up here. So this has come from producer Paul. As of next week, Wednesday's Axon Bulletin will give you, the viewers, an opportunity to dial in and raise your own concerns and queries regarding Celtic. Who wants to get involved? Amy, we're having a phone in. Are you looking forward to it?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
That's you put on the spot.
Yeah. Aye. Kick on.
I mean, I'm sure the calls will be vetted by producer Paul. When you see some of the statements that came in or some of the comments that came in on a daily basis in here, that'll definitely need to be the case. But yeah, looking forward to it. Natasha, the Axon phone-in is finally a thing.
I think it's brilliant. Yeah, you know, there's only so much you can get across with a comment. So it's always great to listen to these phone-in shows which allow people to come on and give their opinion and have a bit of a debate rather than just being able to bring up a comment and us have a chat about it. I think it's an excellent idea. I look forward to people getting involved. I certainly don't envy producer Paul's task of you know, vetoing who's coming on and who isn't. But yeah, brilliant. Let's bring it on, and I look forward to it. I look forward to all the different calls from next week, so people get thinking, what do you want to talk about? Get ready for the phone in. Yeah, brilliant.
Just seeing some of the comments getting brought up here by producer Paul. So yeah, lots to think about next week, Amy. We're going to need to be on our best behaviour next week. We need to watch.
Oh my God.
No pressure, pal.
Yeah, we might have to have a language warning. Yeah, we'll have to put up something on the bottom of the screen, like we have an age limit on this now.
One of those expletive notices that you see on a lot of podcasts.
That's just for you, Colin.
Hey, we'll speak about that off air. No, but yeah, it'll be one of those long-time listener, first-time callers. All those, that's all coming in as of next week.
Yes,
so
we'll get our regulars.
Looking forward to that. But yeah, going back to the point we were just discussing about Karamoko Dembele, Amy, as you were saying, it was this kind of hype around him that he was the next big thing. I think he's got a sponsorship deal with, is it Nike? That he's kind of very heavily, he's got the connections. You see it on his Instagram, he's chatting with Neymar, he's chatting with all these different big footballers, but he's never really had the chance to show what he can do at Celtic. There's 3 games left in this season. I would start him in all 3 games. Yeah,
I would as well. As we're saying, you know, these are the games that all we've done for probably the last 9 seasons, I've said. And obviously, these games for the last 9 seasons have been on a lot bit more harmonious times. But you're saying, right, let's get the youngsters in, let's get those fringe players in, let's give them game time, set them up, and then they can go into pre-season and really try and kick on from there. So it's the opportunity. It really is. We've missed the boat absolutely over these last 9 years. Totally and utterly. And then when it has happened, you know, you've seen your Jack Aitchisons or whatever get a goal against, was it Motherwell or something like that, and then he's never seen again. So it's all these crazy little ones that have happened and they just never really kicked on. But Dembele is, as we've said, he's brought up, his name's brought up here for a reason, because everybody is really excited by him because there's been all that attention brought to him. Mm-hmm. And obviously, like you say, if Nike and if Neymar and whoever may be talking about him, then there has to be something there, and we know there's something there because we've seen it in glimpses. But let's not let it be just glimpses now. Let's give him, 75, 90 minutes, not just the 20 minutes at the end of a game.
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to the first game that I ever went to, and it was Celtic against Dundee United back in the season 99-2000, and the team that lined up that day, there was a lot of 16, 17-year-olds. I think it was until the point of Jack Aitchison maybe playing, it was the youngest ever player, was it Mark Fotheringham? Someone will correct me if I'm wrong here, who was playing at the age of 16. Now, I would love for the last game of the season for us to put out a team like that again, but I just can't see it because we've loaned all these players out. We saw Luca Connell getting an assist for Queen's Park the other day. Ewan Otu's game for Clyde last night was called off at the last minute due to one of the Clyde players picking up a positive test, so we wish them well. But look, I'd love to see these youth players getting a chance. We saw Dane Murray on the bench for the game against Aberdeen. We've also seen Adam Montgomery, Natasha. Look, maybe the game at the weekend's not the right opportunity, but in these last 2 games you've got to see what you can get out of them. And as you said, actually the players that haven't been doing it for us this season, take a seat. Yeah,
I agree. And these players that you mentioned, these young players coming through, they've got something to play for still. They've got to play to impress. I know it might be a different management team in place, but I hope it'll be a different management team in place by the start of next season, but they're still trying to impress. A lot of the backroom team at Celtic will still be around. They've got to try and impress and show why they deserve a place at the club next season and start pushing for the first team next season. So now we're talking about a group of guys who actually have something to play for in these last 2 games you mentioned, rather than the group of guys who already got their minds out of the door. I get that maybe this weekend's game isn't the ideal time to play them, but that actually just frustrates me even more, because the minute the league was done was the right time. We've had weeks of it being the right time to give these players game time. Even if we're not talking about the full game, we're talking, half an hour, 20 minutes. Their opportunity has been there for weeks, and it's frustrating to me that Kennedy hasn't chosen to mix this up at all. For me, I have no idea why he's continued to play Scott Brown. We know that Scott Brown is leaving at the end of the season. He even played him against the club he is going to join. That decision will never make sense to me. I'd love him to explain it to us. Why Sorrell wasn't in there instead of him, I don't know. For me, it just looks like Kennedy is trying to cause as little disruption as possible in his time in charge, not have any disastrous results, and just try and steady the ship until the end of the season and not really try anything different, stamp his own identity on it, because I'm really not seeing any of that. Going forward, I can't see him changing that for the next 3 games. As much as I'd like to see the young guys come in and get a shot, if he was going to do that, he would have done it by now. So I don't think he is. Maybe the last game of the season he'll do it. We'll see.
I was speaking with the boys at Red Tinted Glasses, an Aberdeen podcast. They were very gracious enough to have me on to discuss the pre-match and post-match of the game, and that was the big surprise for them, was that Scott Brown was playing. They know they're anticipating him coming up this season. They're talking about which kind of performance you're going to get out of him, how many games they're going to play. But what they said, and it was a very interesting point, was the fact that Ferguson and Campbell were up against Scott Brown. It almost made them raise their game, because they're like, well, this is my opportunity to show you you're not just walking straight into that team. And if you're going to raise the performances of the opposition, I wouldn't have you playing, as you're saying, play guys like Sorrell. Now, Sorrell, it was quite interesting. I looked up the stats. He's played 21 times this season, which was a surprise to me. I didn't think he'd actually got that amount of games in, but he has only started 11 of them, so 10 of them came off the bench. It's probably 2-3 minute performances that we've not seen. With only 3 games left in the season, and as if you read the papers, there is speculation that Tottenham Hotspur are interested in him. Now, Amy, we spoke about players leaving this summer. We don't need any more, otherwise we'll struggle to put a 5-a-side team out. But look, it's time to give these guys a chance. For me, if I go through it, Sorrell for Brown is one I would definitely do. Rogic for Christie, I'm not 100% on. I don't
What?
know.
You're not a fan of dropping Christie?
No, let me finish. Come on. I would drop Christie, but I would play Dembele through the middle. And I would have Forrest and Elyounoussi at either side of him. I think it's great that James Forrest is going to be back for this game, according to John Kennedy anyway. Looking at his performances since he came back from injury, it showed you exactly what we've been missing. We've been missing that width, and I think we have to ditch the diamond and go back to the 4-2-3-1. Griff for Eddie, it is probably, as Natasha was saying, it's probably the most obvious one. Amy, I agree with you as well. He's got 3 games to show why he should be part of that. Is it 26-man squad for the Euros?
Confirmed, but there's the potential. UEFA obviously wanting it to be extended.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's also playing for his Celtic future. For me, if he had any of those chances that Edward had in the first half up at Pittodrie, he'd have stuck at least one of them away, and the one that he did have, he did put away. So he's got that hunger. Yeah, he's kind of let us down sometimes this season, but just unleash him and see what you've got. So yes, Amy, I'm dropping Ryan Christie this time. I know it caused a bit of debate, but I'm going Sorrell for Brown, I'm going Dembele for Christie, and I will go with Griff for Eddie. But apart from that, do you see any other major changes coming in for the game at the weekend, or is it just going to be a case of Kennedy says we'll make changes, we'll make them maybe eventually?
You know, it could be Beaton starting again, and Ayer maybe going to right back. Could maybe see that, but I think he's quite comfortable with Kenny. I think that'd be maybe more the fans would potentially want that, but then again, do you really want Ayer playing out of position? But then again, he's really quite strong at right back, so it's, you know, there's that buts and maybes. But I think, in all honesty, he'll stick, if Ayer's fit, he'll stick Ayer at centre half, and Kenny will play. And my God, let's just hope it's Greg Taylor. And I know I get a fair amount of pelters that Taylor's not much better. Oh, he is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Amy. I would definitely have Taylor in over Laxalt. I mean, when Laxalt first came in, I thought we had a player on our hands. You know, I thought he stood out. I thought he looked brilliant. the more I've seen of him, the more he has regressed. And I think we have to just look at the first half against Rangers in the Cup. Both our full-backs were shocking. Taylor is much more solid defensively, and we need that against Rangers. Look how often we concede from, set pieces, from cross balls. Laxalt is so often out of position, it draws the rest of the back line out of position. Because he has ran somewhere in the pitch that he is not meant to be, Ayer then gets caught in two minds about whether he's meant to go over and cover. With Greg Taylor, is he the best player in the world? No, he isn't. He is a solid 7 out of 10, but he will give you 7 out of 10 in every single game. He knows what his job is, he knows how to do it, and he'll do it. Nothing exceptional, he won't set the world on fire, he'll just do his job. And at this stage and in this sort of game, that's the sort of player we need. Yeah. Laxalt runs around the pitch like a headless chicken and drawing the rest of the team out of position, and that's not what we need. I think Kennedy will have seen that from the first half against Rangers in the Cup. Obviously, he made the change then pretty quickly. I think with that in mind, he will start Taylor over Laxalt.
The performances of Laxalt have really reminded me a lot of when we had Thomas Gravenson in the side. Now, the performance I'm particularly thinking on is a 3-0 defeat away in Copenhagen, where basically I think he covered every single blade of grass but never touched the ball. He was absolutely pathetic that night, and it kind of summed up Celtic away from home. But yeah, I'm looking at Laxalt and I'm going, why are you in the right back position? You're a left back. He's all over the shop, and this is a guy that had actually won his way into the team of the tournament at the World Cup. Yep. Maybe it was his brother, I don't know. It just wasn't the Laxalt that we're seeing for Celtic this season. And yeah, you mentioned Greg Taylor being a sort of 7 out of 10, but then when I look at it, the right back that came on for Aberdeen at the last week, he was only a 17-year-old boy. He came on for Ross McCrory, and I thought he put Taylor kind of well behind him. He was getting past him, he was getting the balls in. Maybe something for Celtic to take a look at. I know the red tinted boys will be raging that I've suggested that as a transfer target, but look, there's a lot of good talent in Scottish football, but Greg Taylor probably has his level. It wasn't his best game in a Celtic jersey, but yeah, it's again giving the youth a chance. Adam Montgomery's also there, that has been suggested in the left back position. That'll probably not be this weekend, but over the last 2 games maybe we'll see what we can get out of him. So as much as we're not overly looking forward to the game this weekend, we will be covering it on a Celtic State of Mind, so do tune in for the matchday coverage. Now, speaking of matchday coverage, there was some matchday coverage at the weekend. Even though the men's team weren't playing, it was the coverage of the women's team. Natasha, you were part of that as Celtic beat Hibs 3-1. Now, this kind of coverage that's been given to the women's game over the last few weeks, I know other websites out there like the Cynic have been doing it all season, but getting this focus on the women's game, it can only help the development, doesn't it?
That's it, exactly it. If we want to develop and grow the women's game, we need to give it more visibility, and that's not only in mainstream media, but fan media like ours can do our part in building the game as well. Just by us covering it, we can draw more attention to it and we can draw more viewers to it, but we can only draw more viewers to it if it's being broadcast. So we need places like the BBC. Let's look at BT, let's look at Sky. They need to start broadcasting these games like they are going to start doing in England. Let's keep the Scottish game up there as well. And it's great for shows like us to be able to draw more viewers to it. And yeah, let's look at it. A couple of weeks ago we had the option of watching Celtic away in Aberdeen in a league game that was in a league that's already over, or we could watch the women's team playing in a Glasgow derby at Celtic Park with a shot of getting themselves right back into that league title race. Now, I know some people obviously still, of course, watch the Celtic and Aberdeen game, but me and the other guys, you were there, who were commenting on the women's game. I know which game was more enjoyable.
Believe me, I had to watch both of them. It was hard going.
You can tell us exactly which one was more enjoyable. A team of players giving it 110% and securing an absolutely brilliant derby victory, or a team of players who gave 50%? Did they manage that and then scrape a draw?
Best.
And then we got to follow up with the game against Hibs, and we commented that on that as well. And again, what we saw in that game was Celtic went 1-0 down to Hibs and then came back and won 3-1. And that just speaks again to the character and mentality of that Celtic women's team, both in the game against Rangers and the game against Hibs. They really want it, they really fight. And for me, it stems from the side of the park. Fran Alonso is an excellent manager and he's an excellent motivator. You can just see that. Russell is his number one fan, so I'm not going to take that spot. I'll be number two. But so the women's team are really great to watch at the moment. And an update on the league, they're currently sitting in third. They're 2 points behind Rangers. They're 5 points behind Glasgow City. The top two are the Champions League spot. And for anyone who hasn't followed the Women's League, Glasgow City are now on for 14 in a row. Celtic and Rangers over the last couple of seasons have turned professional and are really starting to begin to challenge Glasgow City's lead. What we do see in that league is the top three teams are quite far ahead of the others. So the games against each other are really, really important. It was massive for Celtic to get that victory against Rangers and keep them in that title race. What happens in a couple of weeks' time is Rangers and Glasgow City play each other. So one or both of those teams are going to end up dropping points, again giving Celtic the chance to get right back into that title race. So if anyone out there is looking to watch Celtic play in a chance with a title race, in a chance of a Champions League spot, then why not tune into the women's games? They're often on BBC Alba. They're often shown online and Celtic tweet out the links. Get involved, watch the game, join our analysis on here, and you might enjoy it. It's a refreshing change to see a group of Celtic players giving 110% for the club and winning games.
Yeah, and Celtic are away at Forfar Farmington on Sunday. They actually lost 11-0 to Rangers at the weekend, so it might be a bit of a goal talent. Paul, the producer, just coming in saying Sarah Teagarden is an unreal talent. Is that not a Lawrence Connolly line? I'm sure Lawrence Connolly's her biggest fan. But no, Amy, we spoke earlier about this sort of additional value to the game. If when the fans get back into the grounds next season, having that option to maybe go to watch these games at Celtic Park, especially potentially under the lights of a Champions League game, that would be a great thing to add on to the season ticket, wouldn't it?
It has to be, and Natasha's spot on. I spoke to Joelle Murray a few weeks ago, and there it used to be a 2-horse race, and I've watched Hibs ladies for years. I've got quite a few of my friends have played for them even. So it used to be a 2-horse race between Hibs and Glasgow City, as Natasha said. They're on 14 in a row. I just interviewed Scott Booth the other week as well, and he spoke about it that Celtic and Rangers are investing that money into it, and they're bringing in your Fran Alonso's, and when you look at your Sarah Teagardens, Chloe Craig's my favourite player, but she's been there for a few years. But you're looking at Young Robinson, and they're all there. And the money's there, so of course it would be great to add it to the value, and it's rightfully getting the attention it should finally be given. On the BBC, they're running a sports scene every Sunday now that you are getting the coverage of the whole SWPL, so it's where it's supposed to be. And last week I think Colin and I we both got a fair amount of pelters because I was maybe saying that there would be a fair amount of fans, or I was saying that the standard is a lot greater than many did expect, and the misogynistic comments, they did come in, and Natasha will be well aware of that as well. And it's so hard to try and promote this game, when you've got so many backwards listeners or anyone. Just take a stance. We're not asking you to obviously to admit that you're wrong, but just be a little bit more open-eyed. Really, you wanted to spend how much was it for Aberdeen last week? £15?
Yeah, £13 or something like that.
£13. Yeah, and then you're getting BBC Alba. Just turn it down, fair enough. But it's there, and the coverage, and like I say, the action is way up there, and it's not what it used to be. Obviously there are a few things, and you can draw comparisons all you like, but the standard is ever growing. It really is.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring this point up from Monty, because Monty was someone who was very critical of the women's game, but now has admitted that he enjoyed watching the ladies' game, unconvinced, but has changed his outlook now. Look, that only comes from giving it a chance, and I have to say it's a big congratulations to all the Celtic fan media that's covered these games this season, because it does fall under the Celtic banner, whether it be the Colts team, whether it be the ladies' team or the men's team. It is Celtic at the end of the day. They're putting on the green and white jerseys and they're representing the club. So so we should be supporting them. And as we said, if the games were to come to Celtic Park more often, whether it be under the lights of a Champions League or even something like this game at the weekend, then I'm sure it would definitely draw a crowd. Speaking about drawing a crowd, Amy, I think we're going to draw a crowd next week when we host the first ever AXOM phone-in. I'll give you a week to get prepared for it, but you look scared already.
Hi.
Just as simple as that.
We'll see. I'll be fine.
She says, so unconvincingly, but no, definitely looking forward to that next weekend. Get in touch with Paul if you want to get involved in that one. Natasha, it's been great having you on the Wednesday show. Thank you for making an appearance today.
No, thanks for having me. A nice change of scenery. Nothing against Paul and Lawrence, of course. I will be back to my usual Tuesday club next week. But yeah, nice, and thanks for having me, guys.
And you don't want to admit it, but you told me off air that it was preferably to come on here so that you could be on Sky Sports News yesterday. So if you've not seen Natasha on Sky Sports News, check that one out. It was another great representation of AXOM from Natasha, so well done for that. And you did say that we were an upgrade from Paul and Lawrence off air, but it's not as if Paul's listening.
Don't tell Lawrence.
But AXOM is back tomorrow at 12:30 when Paul John Dykes will be joined by John Paul Mason and Declan McConville. Maybe there'll be some more news on the Eddie Howe saga. See, I got it right again, Amy. I'm doing well.
I'm proud.
I've not even got it written down in my hand anymore. I'm doing not too bad. But no, thank you very much for joining us on the Wednesday Celtic State of Mind Bulletin. Colin Watt, Amy Canavan, Natasha Meikle, all here today to discuss the stories. Catch up, subscribe, like, do everything you can. Share the podcast, share it with people you don't even like. Just let's help us grow the numbers. But thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be back tomorrow. Stay safe, take care, and as always, hail hail.